Hello again, and welcome to Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery. I am Mark, the creator of this channel and of all works presented on it. My technical assistant is my granddaughter, India. Remember that I retain the copyright to all material offered on this channel. Today I have for you a rather grim story. The subject is death, a condition that most normal people wish to avert, or at least put off for as long as possible. This is a tale about some rare few individuals who wish to end their lives immediately. Here is Suicide Pact. Mr. Sebastian closed the door and locked it. With the eyes of 7 people intently focused upon him, he limped his slender body back to the table. The dark hair and beard, the prominent cheekbones, and the thin, tightly drawn lips all suggested a face that didn't know what it meant to laugh. The entire group expected him to come quickly to the point. You all know why we're here. For various reasons, no one in this room wishes to continue to live. Yet, no one desires to take his own life. We have consequently entered into a special pact, according to which we will kill one another. Regrettably, the system is imperfect. There will be one survivor, but that survivor will receive a wonderful consolation prize. It might take away the pain of living and make life seem worthwhile. Let me review briefly the terms to which we have agreed. A plastic card has been made for each of you, bearing your name and the personal data you submitted. All information on the cards has been confirmed by reliable independent sources. Tonight we will place the cards into a box. Then, from that same box, each of us will draw a name which will be shown to no one else. The name we draw is the person whose life we must terminate. There will be a second drawing in the unfortunate event that someone draws his own name. When the cards have been distributed, we will say goodbye and depart. Don't forget that we have agreed to do our work humanely as possible. Remember, too, that our contract contains a tontine clause. Earlier, all of us assigned our entire estates to a single bank account, of which we are joint owners. Thus, the final survivor of our project may claim the assets of the others as consolation for remaining alive. However, that person may not claim his reward before 1 month from today, that is, February 21st, and not until after death certificates have been signed for all other parties to this compact. Finally, no one may leave this city until there is but one single survivor. You should understand that what we plan is illegal. This state recognizes neither suicide nor assisted death. Therefore, our bargain is unenforceable under the law. We are making a gentleman's agreement that carries weight only with those who respect a code of honor. Should you get caught fulfilling your obligation, you will tell the authorities nothing. Similarly, we will disassociate ourselves from you. As you enter tonight, I distributed to each of you a list of names and addresses of the members of our group. Use the list, if necessary, to verify that you are the last survivor. Before we take the final step of drawing names, I would like each of us to identify himself and explain why he wishes to die. That should reduce the possibility that someone will have a change of heart later. Looking around, I see no objections to this suggestion, so I will begin with myself. My name is Rufus Sebastian. As a teenager, I dropped out of high school to help my father in his garment business in Gary, Indiana. Years later, after the death of my parents, I took my commercial acumen to Chicago and set up my own business. By working 14 hours days, I acquired a great fortune, but I paid a heavy price for my gain. My weakened body has fallen victim to cancer. Now doctors have given me less than a year to live. To me, the suicide pact is a welcome treatment for my malady. Seated to the right of Sebastian was a swarthy man with a lithe body and penetrating eyes. His voice was deep and authoritative. I am Hamendra Rana. 10 years ago, I came to this city from Pakistan. My wife and my 2 children accompanied me. 6 months ago, all of them died in an automobile accident. A drunk driver killed them in front of my son's school. Now I have nothing to live for. I beg someone to put me out of my misery. Beside Rana sat a short and portly, dark-skinned woman who nervously scratched an ear. Deep lines in her face and bruises on her arms testified to a life of sorrow. She spoke slowly without looking at her audience. My name is Maria Trevino. I too am an immigrant. Mexico is my country. My husband and I came here together illegally, but he died while crossing the border. I managed to escape with the help of a coyote. Then, in the desert, that same man raped me and left me to die. Somehow I survived and made it to Chicago, where I got a job sewing dresses. But the boss was cruel, and he cheated us workers out of our wages. I started living with a man named Ramon. He seemed nice at first, but when he lost his job, he began to drink heavily and to take out all his frustrations on me. So I moved in with another man named Hector. He turned out to be just as bad. After at least a dozen beatings, I told the priest about my experiences. I told him I wanted to kill myself. The priest said that suicide is a sin, and if I killed myself, God would send me to hell. To me, this world is hell. How much worse could things get? To Maria's right sat a large man with bloodshot eyes, a ruddy complexion, and tattoo-covered arms. He spoke in slurred speech. I'm Bert McPherson. My life's been hell too. The first time I got into trouble with the law, I was only 9 years old. They sent me to juvenile hall for burglary. At age 13, they sent me to a youth detention camp for battery. 5 years later, they locked me in prison for armed robbery. During the 5 years I was there, nearly every guard and inmate in the place took a punch at me sometime. Of course, I got in some good punches of my own. Not long after I got out of prison, a guy in a bar stabbed me with a knife. That's how I got this scar on my chin. All my life, I've been drinking and doing drugs, just like my old man. I'm only 28, but I feel like I'm 60. I'm tired of living. Adjacent to Bert was a red-headed woman with a plain face, expensive clothing, and considerable jewelry. Freckles dotted her pale skin. My name is Kathleen O'Connor. I'm a native Chicagoan. I want to die because I'm a very unhappy person. All my life, I've been a loser. People don't seem to like me. They don't even seem to notice me. I know I'm different from others, but I'd like to have friends. I'm 30 years old, and I've never been out on a date. When my brother died last November, I lost the last human being I could talk to. Life's not worth living. I would have ended things years ago, but I lacked the courage to kill myself. Somebody please help me. Beside Kathleen was a chubby Asian man in a checkered gray suit with a tie depicting eagles in flight. He reeked of cologne. Gel held his thin hair in place over a bald spot. He spoke English with a heavy accent. I Choi Byung, I businessman, Hong Kong. Here, Chicago, I work corporation. Have good job. But I gamble too much. I lose lot of money. To pay debt and gamble more, I steal corporation money. $100,000. Can't pay back. Soon corporation discover loss. Disgrace family. No way out. I want die. There was an awkward moment of silence as Choi broke down in tears. When the crying ceased, the tall, thin man seated beside him in a shabby suit took out a handkerchief and wiped his own eyes before speaking. We understand. My name is Luigi Andreotti. I am an immigrant from Italy. My wife is dead. I live with a daughter who tries to raise 4 children by herself. The welfare money she receives and my pension are not enough. We barely survive. And now the doctor says I have a serious illness. So I have a life insurance policy on my life. It has what they call a double indemnity clause. If someone will kill me and make it look like an accident, my daughter will receive $500,000. I need help. The final speaker, a young blond man with a handsome face, seemed out of place in this setting. He hesitated before saying, I was feeling sorry for myself. After listening to all of you, I don't feel better, but I see that I'm far from alone. My name is Nick Liskanich. Until a month ago, my life had been wonderful. In high school, my classmates voted me the person most likely to succeed. I graduated from the University of Illinois with a high grade point average and high hopes of a good life. Like my father, I intended to be a lawyer. Then, last month, the doctor told me that I had a rare fatal disease. Like you, Mr. Sebastian, I have less than a year to live. But I'm only 23 years old. It seems so unfair. I need your help because I've been told I face an excruciating death. Rufus looked around the table. There you have it, he said. 8 people, all with good reasons to die. Those of you who find killing repugnant should remember what you've just heard. By ending the life of anyone in this group, you are rendering that person a favor. Before we draw names, I should like to have 10 minutes of silence. And during that time, I want each of us to search his soul and make absolutely certain that he wishes to proceed with the plan. Nick scrupulously heeded these words. He strove to find reasons why he should not participate. In the end, he resorted to his original rationale. It was the only way to avert a painful death. The other members of the group were equally serious in their deliberations. After the period of reflection, Rufus spoke again. I'm going to ask each of you individually if you still desire to go forward with our proposal. Understand that this is your final opportunity to withdraw. If all 8 of us still concur, then the matter is settled and irrevocable. After receiving 8 affirmative replies, Rufus placed an uncovered box in the middle of the table. Each person put his plastic card into the box. The leader then asked everyone to close his eyes for a prayer. At the conclusion of the prayer, Rufus held the box above their heads. One by one, the members of the macabre club withdrew a card. Upon looking at the card, each inserted it immediately into a pocket or purse. To close the meeting, Rufus read Tennyson's Crossing the Bar. His final words to the group were succinct. Don't make anyone suffer in suspense. Finish the job within a week if possible. The following morning, Nick felt very restless. His mind was confused. It was one thing to agree to euthanasia, but quite a different thing to commit murder. Somehow he had to transform his law-abiding nature into the predatory mindset of a killer. And what a weird feeling to know that at any moment a stranger was going to kill him. He had at most a week or two to live. Especially troublesome was the fact that he had drawn the name Maria Trebino. It had been easy to agree to kill someone, but now that he had to kill Maria, it seemed different. During the 10 minutes allotted by Rufus for reflection, he had focused on his reasons for wanting to die. He had not considered whether he had the wish to murder another human being, or he had the will to murder another human being. Why did his victim have to be a woman? And why this woman who had endured so much suffering? There were homes in Chicago for battered women. Wasn't it conceivable that with their help, Maria's life could be transformed? The more Nick thought about the scenario, the more distasteful the mission appeared. By midday, another idea came to him. Was this killing scheme really workable? On a piece of paper, Nick printed the letters from A to H in a single line. Then he created hypothetical situations. Suppose B killed F and H killed D. Then there would be no one to kill G or E. The scheme would have at least 2 survivors. The only way the system could work is if the killings were sequential. G kills H, F kills G, E kills F, and so forth, eventually leaving A as the sole survivor. But with a random drawing, and with the killings at the discretion of the individual, the plan was guaranteed to fail. Why hadn't someone in the group realized this? Other intelligent people had been in that room. All must have been so focused on the desire to die that they overlooked the obvious. The telephone rang. A nurse from the medical center said, Dr. Gunther would like you to come to his office as soon as possible. He has important information for you. Annoyed that the physician would disrupt his mind just when it was weighing life-threatening matters, Nick nevertheless acceded to the request. He was wholly unprepared to receive the important information. Gunther told him, I'm terribly sorry. There's been an awful mistake. One of the lab people apparently mixed up the x-rays. The good news is that you're not going to die. You are perfectly healthy. This message reverberated in his head the rest of the day. It was a beautiful world. He had to notify his partners in the suicide pact at once. Rufus had called their agreement irrevocable, but surely this was a revocable exception. Nick dialed the phone number of Rufus Sebastian. A recording informed him that the number was no longer in operation. He sent emails, but received no response. In desperation, he drove to the building where the lethal pact had been made. It was closed, and a for rent sign hung in the front window. Discomposed, Nick called every number on the list of Suicide Club members. He could reach none of his associates. Every number was false, including his own. How had he overlooked this? How could all the others have been deceived? What was the purpose of the trickery, and who was behind it? Rufus Sebastian seemed the logical culprit. As far as Nick knew, that man had recruited all participants in the Pact and had made all arrangements associated with it. But why would he mislead them? The answer came within days when his bank wrote to notify him that a check had bounced. Nick attributed the notice to an accounting error. His previous statement had shown a balance exceeding $6,000. A phone call to the bank revealed that his account had indeed been closed and all assets had been transferred to an account at another bank in accordance with documents that he had signed. Inquiring further, Nick learned that a stipulation in the signed documents denied him the right to know the location of the new account. When he argued that the transfer should not have been effected prior to February 21st, he was told that the document made no mention of that date. Nick was furious. So it was just a con man's scheme to steal people's money. For every pauper like Luigi or Maria, there was an affluent participant like Hamendra or Kathleen. The net worth of the rich must amount to a large sum of money. But how unconscionable to exploit people who wish to die. Distributing false addresses might prevent some killings. On the other hand, honorable people might go to great lengths to fulfill their duty, and such people might act without learning the true motive behind the agreement. On the same day that he received the call from the bank, Nick read a startling news story on the internet. Luigi Andreotti, 71 years of age, had been killed by an unidentified hit-and-run driver. In sympathy for the victim, Nick hoped that the manner of death would trigger the double indemnity provision for which the man had paid so dearly. Andreotti's demise underscored for Nick the fact that he remained the prey of some other member of the suicide club. When he had wanted to die, he had to do nothing special. But now that he wanted to live, he had to take protective measures. Nick grew a beard and wore dark glasses. He moved out of his old apartment and into a new one without leaving a forwarding address. He even changed jobs. Before learning of his fatal illness, the young man had planned to attend law school. Now, even though he had no fatal illness, Nick nevertheless chose to defer this plan. Personal safety had nothing to do with the decision. He simply resolved to work full-time to thwart Rufus Sebastian. Doing nothing would probably mean more lives lost to one man's greed. Although Pact members desired to die, they had a right to be informed of the wicked scheme behind their agreement. Finding these people, however, could be quite difficult. The data provided by Sebastian was untrue, and with two exceptions, the speeches made by participants offered no clues to their whereabouts. Hamendra Rana had spoken of an automobile accident that had taken the lives of his family 6 months earlier. With the aid of the internet, Nick easily located the man. Rana was shocked to learn of the deception and volunteered to aid in the hunt for Sebastian. Now he had something to live for. Nick reminded him that he was still the prey of someone else and needed to protect himself. Bert McPherson had a long criminal record and quite possibly a parole officer. Employing this line of reasoning led Nick to the man he sought. However, McPherson was only mildly surprised to learn of the fraudulent scheme. He expressed the cynic's viewpoint that everybody's rotten and showed no interest in pursuing Sebastian. He also rejected Nick's offer to enroll him in a drug and alcohol abusers rehabilitation program. Young Choi was located in a phone book, and Kathleen O'Connor on the internet. Nick convinced the former to admit the gambling and embezzlement to his family. Then he accompanied the Choi family and an attorney to the police station, where Byung made a formal confession. While informing Kathleen O'Connor of Sebastian's malfeasance, Nick also invited the young woman out on a date. During dinner at an elegant restaurant, he imparted tips on social relations, gave her his phone number, and offered to be a counselor if she desired future advice. The pride that Nick felt about his efforts to help others received a jolt one day when he read on the internet that a 28-year-old man named Bert McPherson had committed suicide in an alley behind a bar. This piece of news redoubled his attempts to locate Maria Tribino. How could he find this woman? An illegal immigrant, she lived in the shadows of society. He focused on the facts that Maria was Mexican and Spanish was her primary language. In the Latino barrios of South Chicago, he searched through markets, churches, and apartment houses without success. Finally, a worker in a garment sweatshop told him that Maria had returned to Mexico. Now all that remained for Nick was to find the man who called himself Rufus Sebastian. He assumed the name was an alias, for what smart miscreant would use his true name to effect such a crime? To open the search, Nick began by writing on paper all that he knew about the man. First, he made a physical description of the subject, only two aspects of which differentiated him from most other people: his limp and his very somber face. Next, the young man compiled a list of actions that Sebastian had needed to undertake: the renting of the building where the group met, the making and printing of the documents they had used, the arrangement of the bank transfers, the manufacture of the plastic cards, and the recruitment of the club members. A real estate agent vaguely recalled the bearded man who had rented the building. Her record showed his name to be Rufus Sebastian. The man had paid the rent in cash, so there were no financial documents associated with the transaction. However, he had left an address. At that location, Nick encountered a black family who had no knowledge of Rufus Sebastian or even of a slender, bearded white man. It took Nick a week to find the person who had printed the legal documents that Pact members had signed. That man remembered Sebastian well. At first, he had declined to do the job, but he had yielded when Sebastian offered a premium price. The printer provided two valuable pieces of information. Sebastian drove a blue Mercedes, and he did not limp. Nick had no success with the officers of the bank. Hiding behind a wall of confidentiality, they insisted that he secure a court order, which the young man knew to be an impossibility. The matter of recruitment seemed to hold great promise. Andreotti and McPherson were dead, and Maria Tribino was somewhere in Mexico, but three others could tell him how they were enlisted. The stories of this trio might contain valuable information. Nick recalled his own experience. He was sitting on a park bench feeling despondent. Suddenly Rufus appeared and engaged him in conversation. It seemed as if the two discovered by chance their mutual desire to die. How had Sebastian acquired foreknowledge of his feelings? At that moment in the park, only he and his doctor knew of the fatal condition. He had not even informed his parents. Amendra Rana revealed that Sebastian had contacted him by phone a week after his family's automobile accident. Identifying himself as a counselor, Sebastian offered to help the unfortunate man. Rana declined the offer. He had already had a fruitless session with a psychological counselor. Now he simply wanted to die. At that point, Sebastian suggested the Suicide Club. In jail, awaiting trial, Byung Choi told Nick that when he was falling in debt, he had received a phone call from Sebastian. Claiming to be a financial counselor, he offered to ease the burden of indebtedness. As things became increasingly desperate, Sebastian proposed the Suicide Club as a solution. Kathleen O'Connor had a quite different story. She had responded positively to a flyer advertising treatment for those suffering from depression, but a series of sessions at the Apex Medical Center had proved ineffective. Shortly after notifying the center of her intention to withdraw, she received an email proposing a final solution to her problem. In an interview with Rufus Sebastian, she learned of what the solution consisted. Nick instantly noted a similarity between his case and that of Kathleen. The Apex Medical Center is where Dr. Gunther had informed him of his imminent death. He telephoned Hemendra Rana. He had just one question. After the accident that killed your family, where did you go for psychological counseling? When Rana replied, the Apex Medical Center, Nick nearly leaped out of his seat. As soon as possible, he visited Byung Choi in jail. The question this time was, have you ever been treated at the Apex Medical Center? Choi said, one time only. Doctor friend mine counseled me gambling. Clearly that was it. Someone at that facility, Rufus Sebastian, or whatever he called himself, was screening files to find candidates for the Suicide Club. Soon Nick arranged with Hemendra and Kathleen to stake out the Apex Medical Center at different hours of the day. On the following day, Kathleen spotted their man walking away from the facility without a limp. She followed him to the parking lot. As he entered a blue Mercedes, she jotted down the license number. At Hemendra's request, his cousin Mustafa accompanied him on the next morning to the Apex facility. The cousin had instructions to follow the man identified by Hemendra to his workplace and to learn his name. Within an hour, Mustafa reported that Rufus Sebastian was actually Luther Mordecai, a file clerk in the mental health department. Nick, Kathleen, and Hemendra held counsel that evening. Going directly to the police might not do the trick. Andreotti and McPherson were dead, and Maria Trevino was in Mexico. As a convicted felon about to receive a prison sentence, Byung Choi would have little credibility. Would the testimony of the remaining 3 victims suffice to secure a conviction? Perhaps not. Mordecai had covered his tracks pretty well. They needed solid evidence. Assuming that the evildoer was still attracting people to his nefarious scheme, the 3 investigators scanned newspapers and the internet for an ad similar to the one that had snared Kathleen. Upon finding one, they instructed Mustafa to call the number. Feigning despondency, Hemendra's cousin received an invitation to an interview. 1 week later, he was enrolled in the Suicide Club. Nick, Kathleen, and Hemendra recorded the meetings of this group through an electronic device worn by Mustafa. At the final gathering, just as Mordecai was dismissing the associates, Mustafa blew a whistle and unlocked the door of the room. Hemendra, Nick, and Kathleen burst in and seized Mordecai by the arms. Then, to the startled onlookers, they explained the foul plot in which they had been involved. There was a mixed reaction to the explanation. 2 men refused to believe that they'd been duped. One asked, how could Mr. Sebastian have had his name drawn without becoming someone's victim? Nick replied, Sebastian was careful to put his card into the box last. That way it would be on the top of the pile. Now you remember that before the drawing of names, Sebastian had everyone close his eyes while he said a prayer? It was simple for him to remove his own card before raising the box for the drawing. From Mustafa, Nick took the list of names he had been given. He, Kathleen, and Amendra pledged to help the unfortunate people in the group. The three of them certainly had something to live for. At the same time, they had plenty of work to assemble evidence for a successful prosecution of the master behind the Suicide Club. In the parking lot, the happy trio escorted the villain to a car for a ride to the police station. Suddenly, Mordecai broke loose and ran from his captors. Realizing that his only way to escape was to dodge through busy traffic, he made a desperate dash into the street. A truck struck him and hurled his body into the air. Still alive, Mordecai had a broken leg and several broken ribs. As they lifted him into a paramedic van, one attendant said, "That's really a nasty fracture of the leg. I'll bet he'll walk with a limp for the rest of his life." His companion responded, "Yeah, he should have known better. Running into heavy traffic like that is suicide." End of story. The next presentation in Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery will occur on April 1, April Fool's Day. Appropriately, I offer you on that date an outrageous comedy. Until then, take care with the coronavirus.